Hi, I'm Dr. Connie Stapleton, and I'm a friend of Laura Preston's, and this is quite an honor, and I appreciate it, Laura. I love the work that you do. I've loved it for years. We've known each other for a long time now. And Laura has asked me to talk to you today about how to go about finding a therapist. So I said I would do that because I'm a therapist. Might have said my name already, Dr. Connie Stapleton. I live in Augusta, Georgia. And, you know, finding a therapist depends, of course, on what the issue is and why you're going to therapy in the first place. Perhaps you've got a specific issue. It could be, could be related to weight. It could be related to marriage. It could be related to the family you grew up in. Maybe you're having a difficult time at work, or maybe you have a sick family member. There are all kinds of reasons to go to therapy, but how to find a good therapist can sometimes be difficult. I personally have a bias in looking for a therapist who has been trained in family systems therapy. And I'll explain that to you, my reasons for saying that, in just a few minutes. But first of all, let's face it, sometimes the almighty dollar is what determines what kind of therapist we can go to. So if you plan to use your insurance, if you have insurance to pay for your therapy sessions, you might as well start with checking out your insurance website and finding who in your area is available. Most of the time they will list specialty areas for each therapist. For example, a therapist may say they do addictions counseling, or they may say that they do marriage and family, or they see adolescents, or they work with anxiety, or they work with depression. So it will give you some ideas, some guidelines as far as what their areas of specialty are. So that's the first place to start. The next place to start is by calling to see if there's availability. In a lot of areas, sadly but true, therapists are not taking new patients because we're busy, we're full. And that is very discouraging, especially if you have some kind of emergency or pressing acute issue. The reason that we don't want to take new patients, even if we may have a little bit of availability, is it's not fair to take on new patients if we can't fit them in on a regular basis. So, you may have therapists who are new in the area and they need new patients, or you may have therapists who, have recently graduated some of their clients and they're taking new patients. But make sure you find out, how often can they see me. If you have an idea in your mind that you want to be seen weekly or every couple of weeks, make sure that they have that availability before you start with them. Otherwise, you might be in for a letdown. Okay, so once you've looked on your insurance, then you can see if the therapist that you're interested in has a website. Most of us do have websites now. Some don't, but if the one you're looking at does, check them out. See if you like how they present themselves, what kind of language they speak in. I'm in the process myself of creating a new website, and so I was busy typing up all of the relevant verbiage, and I read it and I thought, this doesn't sound at all like me. It sounds like I want to say it sounds like a professional. I am a professional, but I'm a very laid back person, and I don't speak in hyper intellectual language. So I changed it all to reflect the kind of person I am. I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to, be pretty laid back with you. People are so surprised when they come into my office, which this is not. This is my home. But my office, I have a big comfy lounge chair, and I'm curled up in a blanket, and I take my shoes off, and, it's like, whoa, this isn't what I expected. But, if that's not for you, then if you want somebody sitting behind a desk, then you can find that. And that's my next point, is you need to find a therapist that you're comfortable with. I have a family member who recently decided to seek some counseling for some fairly specific issues, And he went to 3 different therapists before he found one that he felt like he clicked with. The first one he went to barely said a word, didn't ask a lot of questions, just kind of, he said there was a lot of long, awkward pauses. That's the style of some therapists. They expect the patient to do the talking, and they'll, give feedback or they won't. If you're not comfortable with that kind of a therapist, find a different kind of a therapist. I refer to myself as a firm and fair therapist. In other words, I have tremendous amounts of compassion, but I'm going to tell people pretty straight what I hear them saying to me. Keep in mind that it's not my job or any therapist's job to tell you what to do. My job is for me to help you find answers for your own issues. And the way that I do that is basically by telling you what I hear you say. I don't repeat back. I'm not a parrot. But a lot of times when I listen to someone else, or when you listen to someone else, you hear things that they don't necessarily hear themselves saying. For example, you might say to a friend, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you sure, berate yourself regularly. I do? We may not be aware of it. So my job is to kind of point out to people what I hear them saying, or, put things together that they might not have seen to string together themselves, or to point out discrepancies in what they're saying and what they're doing. So the job of the therapist is kind of point out subtleties, kind of help people to see themselves more clearly and to seek their own answers. Now, I am the kind of person who's going to give it to you straight, like I said. So if you're uncomfortable with that kind of a therapist, then don't go to one who is. It's not that I'm telling people what to do or how to do it, but I am going to say, you know what? I hear you saying this, but I see you doing that. Those two things don't match up, so let's kind of explore that, or what gives. I tell patients, you're not paying me to pat you on the back and not give you any feedback. I pat people on the back all the time. I'm very compassionate, like I said, but I'm also very affirming and, try to help people see what they're doing well as what they might want to change in their lives to make their lives a little easier for themselves. So if you don't want somebody who's going to give it to you direct, find somebody who's more what we call Rogerian, which means it's a style of therapy based on a therapist from long ago named Carl Rogers. So if somebody says to you, I'm very Rogerian, you can count on them to pat you on the back and be very kind and hardly ever do any confrontation. I do confrontation, but I do it very gently and lovingly. I had a therapist who was a professor. This was when I was in school, and the best advice I got to be a therapist is be who they need you to be. So if somebody needs me to be kind and compassionate and a loving mother or grandmother, then that's who I am. If I sense that they're needing somebody to give them a little bit of a swift kick in the rear in a gentle and loving way, then that's what I do. But find somebody who you connect with. That's the bottom line. And it's been shown through research that the most curative factor in a therapeutic relationship is the relationship between the therapist and the client. So find a person you feel comfortable with and that you can connect with. So that's how you go about finding a therapist. But why might a person want to even go to therapy? There are a lot of reasons. It could be something specific and time limited, like having, an issue on the job, or, dealing with a sick parent or something like that. But it also could be more systemic, which goes back to what I was saying about find a family systems therapist. My belief is that, there's a poem called Children Learn What They Live, and the author is Dorothy Nolte. You can look it up online. It's a wonderful poem, and basically it says if children are complimented, they learn to compliment. If children are encouraged, they become encouraging. If they are criticized, they become critical. And that's not only of themselves, but others as well. In my experience, the biggest need for therapy is to heal our relationship with ourselves. People come in, they want couples counseling, or they want relationship counseling, or they want to deal with their teenagers or whatever. The best way to heal anything in life is to look at what you're doing, what part you have in these relationships, figure out what works best for you, and figure out what's not working for you in your relationships. We all learn what we live, which is the title of that poem I was referring to. And what happens is we learn what we live because we're kids and we grow up in a household and we learn those beliefs and those attitudes and those prejudices and those good, strong points, and it may be caring, whatever it is. We learn to communicate with partners by how we see our parents communicate, or we learn that marriages can't last because a parent's been married and divorced 5 times. We learn what we live, and then the rule of thumb is we live what we learned. Now, we can argue that all day long and say, but I don't. It's true, you don't a lot of things that you lived. And that's where we go, what are you doing better than what you experienced? What from your childhood and your experiences do you want to keep because they're good and wonderful and you want to pass those on? And what do you want to change? So it's not about criticizing anybody. It's not about blaming anybody. It's just about saying, this is what happened in my life. This is how it affected me. And this is how it's affecting my life today. And in some ways, those things aren't going to be so productive. I like to say that in some ways, at some points in time in our lives, our cups were spilled. And what that means is all of us have some good things that have happened in our lives, and all of us have some unpleasant things that have happened in our lives. And the younger we were when those unpleasant things happened, be it, being made fun of at school by other kids, or having a teacher or a coach or a scout leader say something that just embarrassed us and humiliated us and just kind of still makes us cower, or whether it was some sort of neglect in the family, whether it was because, parents were working too much because there was one parent and they had to have extra jobs, or whether it was because they had a sick parent they were caring for, or you had a sick sibling that was getting all the attention, or whether it was abuse of some sort. It doesn't matter. We all had our cups spilled. In other words, we're coming to this world with a full cup, full of all the goodness and love and joy and, self-love that we need. And somewhere along the line, things get spilled. And so when we become an adult, we're not as full as we once were. And we react to adult situations sometimes out of our hurt spots. So if we were criticized a lot, the boss may come in and say, well, how are you doing on that project? Neutral question. But we may feel, devastated, like, oh my God, they're picking on me, and why do they think I'm, why does he have to, control everything I do? And that's not what happened at all. But maybe if you have a filter, because everything comes through to us from our own filters of life. If you have a filter of having been criticized, you're going to hear things as criticism. A therapist can help you say, is that what was really happening? Do you think you were being criticized? What's the evidence of that? Or is this your interpretation and you're reacting to whatever happened in life through that filter of appearing to be criticized all the time? A really common one is people don't feel important. That's their theme. I don't feel important. I wasn't important to my parents. I wasn't important to my siblings. I was the one left out, whatever it is. Well, what happens is we take that theme, I'm not important, and then we find that in all of our relationships. All my friends are doing something together and they left me out. I'm not important to them. Or my spouse has these outside interests, and so therefore, clearly, I'm not important to them. Or, everybody at the office went out for lunch today and they didn't invite me. Clearly, I'm not very important. But what we do is we inadvertently set it up so that we can say, see, I knew it. I'm just not important. So a therapist can help you realize what these themes that you're operating out of are, and help you to say, let's take a closer look at that. Where does that come from for you? Sometimes I like to say we all have an inner child who drives our bus. The inner child that drives our bus is usually the reactor. If you react to a situation and the reaction seems to other people a little more intense than the situation warrants, it's usually because something within you, something came through your particular filter that insulted you or offended you or, resulted in you being defensive. And so that child reacts to the situation instead of having a healthy adult response to a situation. So anytime you feel like you're overreacting, your emotions, it's called emotional dysregulation. You know, you have a meltdown, or you act out, or you know, blast people, or whatever. Whenever your response or your reaction isn't a healthy adult response, or what you think a healthy adult response should be, it's usually because we're reacting out of childhood wounds. So those are all good reasons to go to therapy, and that's why I like systems therapists, or people who are trained in family therapy systems. And psychologists usually have a background in systems therapy. A lot of master's counselors do. A licensed marriage and family therapist definitely has a background in systems therapy, because most of our issues are systemic. In other words, they don't just involve us. They involve a family system, the system that you're in today as an adult, and or the system you came from as a child, because we learned what we lived there. Now we bring it forward, we live what we learned. So it's deciphering, what do you want to keep in your life? What do you want to change about yourself? Because every time you make a change in yourself, it's going to cause a change in a relationship, right? My therapist said to me once, when I was very young and had young children, she said, and I was arguing with my 6-year-old son a lot. She said, Connie, if you quit arguing, there won't be an argument. I thought, oh, dang, she is so right. I was the one that needed to quit arguing with the 6-year-old, right? But it was my defensive child fighting for control with the 6-year-old. We have dance steps in all of our relationships. We all have a dance, right? I had a dance with that child. I have a different dance with another child. I have a dance with my spouse. And if things aren't going well, one of us has to change the dance steps. And if I change the dance steps, quite likely the other person is going to change in response. If I apologize in an argument, it's amazing. Very often the other person will say, I appreciate the apology, and I'm sorry for my part. So a great question to learn from your therapist or practice in therapy is, what's my part in this situation? Because if you can learn to change your part, whatever that is, chances are all of your relationships will improve. But the number one thing you have to do is heal your relationship with yourself. So if you're a self-basher, if you criticize yourself, you need to change that self-talk. And the only way to change it is by doing it. So I'm a big proponent of therapy. Please go. Find someone you're comfortable with. Here's the bottom line. My life is my responsibility this day and every day. So get help and get happier. Anyway, I hope that this helped you all. I have lots of free things you can download from my website. The new one will be up very soon. And I thank you, Laura, for this opportunity. And keep doing the good work you're doing with her, ladies and gentlemen. She's a gem. See you soon, friend. Bye-bye.